it's so much about building consensus. How do I get people on board? How do I build a team to achieve a common goal? And you can take the route in leadership of this is what we're going to do and this is why we're going to do it. Or you can work to understand the concerns of the people that work for you. What are their interests? What are their motivations? And figure out how do you build towards that same goal, maybe in a way that you can get them on board.
This program is going to air right around Veterans Day.
Anything discussed today are my personal views and not representative of the U.S. Army or the United States Military Academy, which is just something we have to share and say.
So as you've taught negotiations, kind of what are some of the things that you are learning that are new and interesting to you? Are there any new topics or aspects of negotiations that you're exploring? Anything like that going on?
Before I got here and before I started teaching, all of it was new to me. So in that process, there's so much that is. As far as new and interesting, we'll talk about it a little bit later, I think, as we talk. But there's so much work that I spend time talking with cadets and soldiers. As we understand good leadership in the Army, so much of it is understanding the other people that we work with. And Chris Argyris's ladder of inference work about understanding how other people reach different conclusions than we do has been really fundamental in getting both my cadets to understand why other people can look at the same information and reach different conclusions. And it's really been instrumental in working with the advisor communities that I work with. And just how do we look at the same information, but because of the experiences we've had, the training we've had, what we feel is relevant will lead us to really different conclusions. While that's not a new concept, it was new to me and really fundamental in how I've changed how I think about things. Topics or aspects of negotiation that I found interesting or exploring a little bit. I had the opportunity to take some cadets to ISE Business School in Barcelona this summer, and it was a really tough duty. Somebody had to take the cadets to Barcelona.
Wait a sacrifice. You know, every red leg listening to this podcast right now is like has a little envy of you.
Yeah, they went to NTC and I went to Barcelona, right? They were in the deserts in California. So there's a gentleman there named Kondrat Mata who wrote a new book that came out last year, Negotiate Good, Negotiate Well. And he had just some fantastic behavioral aspects of negotiations in that book that got me thinking a little bit differently about how I teach the course. And the course here at West Point is so much around principled negotiations. How do we tackle problems side by side versus me against, me versus you? But the understanding the behavioral stuff is still really important. And so I hadn't spent a lot of time in that side of negotiations, and digging into a little bit of what he had in that book has just been new and interesting in the last year.
I wanted to hit on the first thing you talked about good leadership. You've taught leadership at West Point. You taught in the core leadership course that all cadets have to take. I assume MG 390, the negotiation course there, is still called Negotiation for Leaders. Is that right?
It is.
From your own thinking, what's the connection between leadership and negotiation? Because I think many people would say, I negotiate. It's something I do occasionally. You seem to be framing it a little differently.
So what was amazing about teaching the leadership course here at West Point is all of the lessons, both through failure and success, that I had learned through my Army career of these are my general rules for leadership. It turns out there's a lot of research into leadership. And coming here to teach the class, it was an opportunity to take those things that were just kind of Travis's rules or Travis's way of leading and learn the actual research of that's why that one didn't work, right? It was really good. What's fantastic about the negotiation course and teaching it from negotiation for leaders is there's this outside perspective that leadership in the Army is just top down, rank driven, that I tell you what to do and you're going to do it. And leadership is leadership, regardless of its situation. And it's so much about building consensus. How do I get people on board? How do I build a team to achieve a common goal? And you can take the route in leadership of this is what we're going to do and this is why we're going to do it. Or you can work to understand the concerns of the people that work for you. What are their interests? What are their motivations? And figure out how do you build towards that same goal, maybe in a way that you can get them on board. And when you don't want to or are unwilling to force or coerce somebody else to take the course of action that you want, it kind of becomes a negotiation, understanding their fundamental interests, their concerns, their motivations to lay out a path forward. And even if I don't ultimately go as a leader with that course of action that they've, kind of pushed for, going through that process allows them to feel heard, that their concerns have been accounted for, and they're much more likely to be on board with whatever. The opportunity to bring them on board and work towards that goal together in a way that, even if it's not the one they wanted, it will ultimately lead to better results.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting twist for listeners to hear who may not be familiar with the military and assume if you've got all the authority and position of a power, why are you concerned about these things? And I think you've made a good case why effective leaders, regardless, military, business, a nonprofit, why they should be concerned about the concerns of others. Push you a little further. Does that apply leading up your chain of command too? Can you apply some of that thinking as you try to lead upward as well?
Yeah, and I actually think that that's probably even a little more applicable in this situation, right? When it comes to my bosses, I can't rely on rank. I can't go and say, Major Cyphers thinks that it should be done this way. So it's understanding, what is my boss's concerns? What are his or her interests? What are they trying to achieve? And can I present solutions that meet my interests as well, and maybe meet those concerns in a different way, but lead to better outcomes or are less painful for me to accomplish those tasks? I think leading upwards has so much relationship to negotiation, because it's really about understanding the person above you. What are their concerns? What are their motivations? And then figuring out how you can present solutions in a different way that will still meet those, but might not have been in the way that leadership has originally presented them.
You mentioned Kendar Mehta. You met him this summer. Is that you were able to opportunity to meet him at IESC?
Yeah, we sat down and we had a couple of different meetings actually, where we talked through his book. We talked through how he teaches negotiation there. It's structured a little bit differently than we teach here at West Point, but obviously so many of the concepts are the same. He incorporates behavioral stuff a little bit more, anchoring what is it like to have some tactics at the table that might claim value a little bit better, but still talking about working together, tackling problems jointly, etc.
Yeah, one of his articles I just recently kind of discovered and really enjoyed was called 5 Essential Strategies for Creative Negotiations. And it's as you're talking about bringing solutions, right? Anyone can identify a problem, but if you're going to be an effective subordinate, or, you're going to really help your manager leader, the ability to be creative and come and say, this idea of options, present 3, 4, 5 different ways we can go about this, boss, commander. It really helps. It makes you a more influential and persuasive person.
Yeah, I really think so. And it's better for the organization if both the leader and the led think that way, right?
Yeah. You're working with some amazing cadets there through your course and the project. What can you highlight? I think our listeners might be really impressed to hear about some of the things cadets are doing, the contributions they're making, or maybe some of the growth you're seeing in them as negotiators, these young, 18, 19, early 20-something-year-olds.
The thing that I'd like to highlight the most is the COVID pandemic really changed things here at the Academy, like it did everywhere for a number of, for a year and a half. And in May of 2020, or March of 2020, the cadets went on spring break and never came back. And then very quickly we had to figure out how to teach in a virtual environment. That led forward a year where still dealing with COVID, actively concerned about many of those things, rightfully so. We weren't allowed to take cadets on these academic individual advanced development programs where, coming from USMA, cadets don't get to really do internships like normal universities would, but they're generally given 3 to 4 week opportunities, especially from the management program where I teach, to go work with businesses and see what does business look like when you're not wearing the uniform, to apply many of those skills that they have learned, whether it be finance or accounting or strategy or marketing or human resource management. The summer of 2021, cadets could only go do one of these programs if it was at a military base. And so we were kind of scrounging for how do we create opportunities or experiences for cadets to get credit for this, but still take course material and apply it in a different situation other than the academic environment. And so I crafted and created an IAD, that's what we call them, to take 2 cadets with me for 3 weeks to train different Army units. And summer 21 and then this summer 22, I took 2 cadets, gave them quite a bit of reading to do, preparation work. Then they helped me run the West Point Negotiation Project Army Leaders Workshop here at the Academy, 4-day event where we bring leaders from all across the Army here. They helped with logistics and some of the basic debrief stuff, but over the course of the 3 weeks, they gradually took over more and more responsibilities where we'd do the workshop here. The next week we went to another unit, and they taught about 35% of the course material. And then we went to another unit, and the two cadets between them each taught about a third of the course. So it was pretty amazing to see their understanding of negotiations grow to the point where they could feel confident enough teaching commissioned officers, seasoned non-commissioned officers. And by that third week, some of the best moments where they were able to field tough questions that we hadn't prepped, but they were able to take these concepts that we had been discussing for 2.5 weeks and thoroughly understand the material well enough and these concepts well enough that they could answer those concerns from seasoned officers and sergeants in the U.S. Army and answer them succinctly. So I think that's the kind of coolest thing that I've been able to do as far as taking cadets and helping them grow in this area of negotiations. We still have negotiation fellows who have opportunities to lead some events here on campus at the academy. They get to engage with some unique speakers, etc. But that event over the last 2 summers has been just amazing to see that growth within a couple of young cadets.
Hey, thanks for listening to today's episode. If you could please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast, we'd greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next episode.